What is up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of the Fantasy Football RPG podcast. We appreciate you guys joining us today to talk some Aaron Rodgers and what this signing with him going to the Pittsburgh Steelers likely means for your fantasy team. All right, so as we usually get started here, let's go over to Dynasty Data Lab. We'll do a quick dive right there. And we will quickly see, okay, where is he currently going? We're looking for the quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers right there, QB 35. Look, I fully expect this to continue to steam up. I fully expect this to be closer now that he's signed somewhere in this 11th, 12th, 13th round is where you'll start seeing Aaron Rodgers going. Man, there's some tough quarterbacks there. If they're your quarterback too, good luck. Maybe if you can get a Stafford or a Geno, you can get away with them being your quarterback too, going a little bit earlier there in the 10th round. But Rodgers is your prototypical quarterback 3 for a team that likes to turn and burn the quarterback position, especially the backup quarterback position, and just doesn't want to spend a ton of draft capital on that position. What were you able to get him for? Well, you were able to get him for, say, a third before the news, and right now you're probably talking a very late second. Maybe you can sweet talk somebody into 2/3. But the signing has definitely elevated his value. People are definitely asking more than they were just a couple of weeks ago in the offseason. So if you invested in Aaron Rodgers earlier in this offseason, fantastic. Good on you for taking that risk. And now you're going to see some payback from it. Maybe you bought him for a third, and maybe now you're just looking to flip him for a second. That's a fine process play when you go over and you look at what he did last year. This is one of the things where you got to figure out what exactly is important to you at the Superflex position, at the backup Superflex position, at the backup quarterback position. All right, so if you feel like you have 2 strong quarterbacks and you're feeling like you don't have to have a strong backup quarterback, sure, Rodgers is a fine case here. When we sort by points per game, we're talking 22nd last season with 15.7 fantasy points per game. If you go over to his season stats and you look at that very quickly, obviously, first play of the game, that's a null and void season. You look at that 500 pass attempts for basically every season here that we're looking at going back to 2018, the injury shortened 2017 season for him. And then you continue to look down, 500 plus unless he was injured, not playing a full season. Now, that is in contrast to what this Steelers offense wants to be doing, what the Steelers offense has shown that they're trying to do. So that'll be really interesting to watch. But how many dud weeks did he really put up for you this past season? We got week 1, really a dud. Week 10, 4 points. That's definitely a dud. But if you start looking at this before the bye week, top 24 weeks, everything but 2. Those 2 dud weeks, which if you're playing a Superflex format and everybody's starting quarterbacks in that Superflex position, then you're really just looking for top 24 weeks from your quarterbacks. And you had a couple boom weeks. You had a QB 10, a QB 10, QB 12. So you're really looking at that. And then you start getting later in the season. There was a QB 4 week, 3 touchdown week. He still has some of that potential. I just personally think with the Steelers that it is a little different of a situation. They definitely want to run the ball. They're definitely looking to Rodgers. to be more of the, hey, let's get the ball out. Let's try and work with our offensive line. Let's try and protect them as much as possible. Because when we go over to the Steelers here and you look historically at the team, 499 pass attempts last season, and you saw the quarterback situation they had. Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, battling through that. Then you look at the run game, 533 rush attempts last season between everybody in the offense. Obviously, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson accounted for about 100 of those. Aaron Rodgers is not a runner at this point in his career. You definitely want to keep him healthy as much as possible. So I fully expect there to be less than that 100 carries. You're probably talking a full season somewhere around those 60 carry mark. So when we start thinking about that, then even before offensive coordinator changes, you go back and you just say, okay, Tomlin was running the show here. So what did Tomlin want in the previous seasons before? 506 attempts, 487 rush attempts. All right. Pretty balanced, pretty stable, pretty similar. And that's with Kenny Pickett helming it. Once again, another Kenny Pickett season, 571 pass attempts to 500 carries. All right. So you start looking at all of that and you say, okay, like maybe they were a little pass unbalanced before. They definitely got into more of the pass balanced situation. So is it reasonable to say that Rodgers is going to, if healthy, going to have somewhere around 500 pass attempts for the season? Sure. I mean, that should be reasonable based off of historic trends of this offense. Like I showed you before, Rodgers' career, unless he hasn't played a full season, you're talking about somebody who has had 500 plus pass attempts. At this point in his career, he seems to still want it. He seems to still want to go after that many pass attempts, seems to be willing to do what the team needs for him to try and win and for the team to try and win. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to PFF and be able to look at this team here. And once again, we are talking a defensive-led team. Start looking at the defense and you say that defense could win them a lot of games. You look at the offense, the offensive line has a handful of question marks along it, even though they've invested relatively high draft capital these past couple years into it. Frazier has turned into a very solid center from them. Freiermuth is still a solid tight end. Washington is a mammoth of a human being out there at tight end. So running those two tight end sets with DK Metcalf on the outside and then Tyler Warren and Caleb Johnson in the backfield should support them well. The biggest question is going to be that wide receiver 2 role. It is rather unclear. No, not rather. It is very unclear how fruitful that wide receiver 2 role will be. But if you're talking 500 pass attempts, DK Metcalf should be able to get his. They just paid him, gave him a bag. So they're most likely looking for him to produce high wide receiver season for them from a fantasy perspective. Freiermuth, target's got to go somewhere. Freiermuth is an able-bodied pass catcher. Tyler Warren out of the backfield. Maybe you see multiple two-back sets in this offense. Maybe they go extra heavy, give them a little bit more versatility, give Rodgers a couple more reads to be able to have here and there. But overall, what do I expect out of Rodgers? All right, that's probably why you're here. That's probably why you're watching this video. Rodgers, I very much expect somewhere around that 14.5 to 15 points per game this coming season, with a handful of boom weeks being top 10 fantasy QB weeks, and then a handful of just dud weeks where he's outside of the top 24. Realistically, we're probably talking 2 to 3 booms and probably 2 somewhere in that range bust weeks. So If you're trading for Rodgers and you got him for a third, it's found money. Great job. If you get 2 starts out of him this season, that is a plus on your acquisition price. Now, if you're having to pay a 26 second, that's where you start needing a little bit more out of Rodgers. You have maybe a shakier QB2 situation rather than having a very solid QB2 situation, which you probably just wanted to churn and burn at the quarterback 3. So is he going to be more viable than starting a position player at that Superflex position? Unless you're loaded at the position players, wide receiver, running back, you have a big premium on tight ends, say a full point tight end premium, and you have somebody like Njoku, Kelsey, Hawkinson as your tight end 2, then you're most likely looking at wanting to start a quarterback. And Rodgers was still is a relatively cheap option to be able to do that. So if you want to take a swing on him, go for it. At this time, I think he's still a perfectly fine investment. You're looking at getting 1 year out of him. Anything after that is just absolute icing on the cake. But you're looking at a 1-year rental, and that's what those third-round picks are for. In my opinion, it's being able to go out and get those 1-year rentals to be able to help you out, give you some stability. And if you're rebuilding, those third-round picks are there for hope. They're here for having the fun of making a draft pick when the draft season comes around. They're there for using for trade fodder to be able to add, to be able to get up in a little bit better of a position, move up a pick or 2 in the second, something like that. Maybe you see that tier break and you're just like, here, take my third, go ahead, or take their third. So all that being said, Aaron Rodgers should be a fine addition to your fantasy team. Don't be expecting the Aaron Rodgers of old. He is now getting very old from football standards. So measure your expectations. All right, y'all. Have a good night.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Football RPG Podcast. If you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to check out written content, head over to lastwordonsports.com.
Don't let the goblins get you.